House number 1, Castle Dromborg, Fayetteville, Arkansas in the Ozark foothills. 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 8,825 square feet, sitting on nearly 34.5 acres. Built in 2007, listed at $4.8 million. Let's start with the number that separates this house from almost every other one on this list. It's only 18 years old. This isn't a decayed Victorian relic that survived by accident. Someone built this to look like a genuine medieval fortress, on purpose in the 21st century, using over 4,000 tons of native stone, each piece hand-hewn and individually fitted into place. That's not a renovation. That's an entire castle constructed from scratch, stone by stone, less than 2 decades ago. Look at it from above. A square stone tower rises 4 stories above the main structure, capped with a steep tile roof and flanked by small turret details at the corners. The rest of the house sprawls out from the base of that tower in low stone wings with tile roofing, nestled directly into wooded mountainside. From the air, it looks less like a private residence and more like something you'd find guarding a European hillside, which is exactly the intent. The listing itself calls this Arkansas's own state treasure and heritage property. Walk up close to the tower and the stonework gets even more obvious. Rough, irregular native rock climbs the entire face of the structure, broken up by arched windows and a stone balcony near the top, a chimney rising even higher above that. There's a covered stone archway at ground level leading into the main house, and off to one side, a bright glass sunroom addition the one clearly modern touch against all that medieval stone. Now step inside, and the interior matches the exterior's ambition completely. A coffered wood ceiling with deep exposed beam stretches overhead, ornately carved crown molding running the full perimeter. Fluted stone columns with carved capitals frame the hallway leading toward an arched wooden door in the distance. Warm cherry, walnut, maple, and oak millwork covers nearly every surface. The listing specifically calls out the finest species of each wood used throughout the hand-carved moldings. A stone fireplace mantel anchors one end of the room, travertine tile flooring underfoot. This room alone looks like it belongs inside an actual European manor house, not a 21st century build in the Ozarks. Here's where it gets genuinely strange for a modern home. There's a 4th floor observation deck, 70 feet up, with panoramic views straight into the Ozark Mountains. That's a structural commitment most people don't make, even when building historic-style homes, a purpose-built lookout tower on a private residence, specifically so someone can stand above the tree line and survey the entire valley. The grounds match the fortress theme. A gated entrance with a private lane off the main road. A pond stocked with perch and catfish. A small in-ground pool with the potential to be heated. Radiant floor heating running throughout the entire house to fight off Ozark winters. The listing goes as far as suggesting you could build your own winery on the property or turn the whole thing into a must-book event space. Genuine flexibility for a property this large and this architecturally singular. And despite feeling like it's a world away, it's only 5 minutes from downtown Fayetteville and the University of Arkansas, with a private airfield a mile away and interstate access 30 minutes out. This is total seclusion with genuine convenience layered right underneath it. 5 bedrooms. A 4-story stone tower. 4,000 tons of hand-fitted native rock. A 70-foot observation deck looking into the Boston Mountains. $4.8 million for a genuine, built-to-last fortress hiding in the Arkansas hills, proof that you don't need a century of decay to build something that looks like it's guarded these mountains forever. Sometimes the castle is brand new, and it's just getting started. House number 2, 357 Lorraine Boulevard, Windsor Square, Los Angeles. 13 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, 12,565 square feet. Built in the 1890s. Listed at $15 million, over $750 a square foot in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country. This house wasn't originally built here. It was constructed in the 1890s by Isaac Newton van Nuys, And in 1915, his son J. Benton Van Nuys physically relocated the entire three-story Victorian to its current spot in Windsor Square. That's not a renovation detail, that's an entire Gilded Age mansion, picked up and moved across the city over 100 years ago, and it's still standing exactly where it landed. Look at what's inside now. The stairway carpet runs in deep, saturated blood red down the center of a dark wood staircase, red patterned wallpaper climbing the walls beside it. The formal dining room continues the same color story, a long table set beneath a crystal chandelier, red upholstered chairs lined up on either side, dark wood linen fold paneling covering every wall, leaded stained glass windows filtering colored light across the room. Even the swimming pool outside carries the theme, tinted with a deep reddish glow at dusk, surrounded by manicured gardens and stone terracing. Red is the through line of this entire restoration, room after room, all the way out to the water. Here's the number that says everything. No expense was spared in this restoration. Multi-zone HVAC was installed throughout the entire house without disturbing a single piece of the original intricate wood or plasterwork, meaning modern climate control was threaded invisibly through more than a century of untouched craftsmanship, rather than tearing any of it out to make room. The main residence includes a grand salon that flows directly into a library, a den, and a formal sitting room. 5 bedrooms occupy the second floor, including multiple full suites and an oversized walk-in closet. But the top floor is where this house gets genuinely theatrical. It doubles as an actual theater, complete with a full bar and kitchenette, a real stage fitted with its original footlights, and a dramatic turret side room built right into the performance space. That's not a home theater with a projector, that's a functioning, purpose-built stage inside a private residence, original footlights and all. There's a hidden bar with hand-carved walls that conceals a secret door, and that secret door leads straight out to the pool, spa, and gardens. A literal hidden passage built into a Victorian mansion, connecting the most private interior room to the most exposed outdoor space on the property. Beyond the main house, there's a separate 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom carriage house sitting on top of a large garage, and that garage includes an exterior turntable, a mechanism built specifically to rotate vehicles around without needing to reverse them. A detail almost nobody builds today. 7 fireplaces total, gated and secure, set back on nearly 27,000 square feet of land. 13 bedrooms. A relocated 1890s Victorian mansion. A hidden bar with a secret door to the pool. An actual theater stage with original footlights. A garage with its own vehicle turntable. $15 million for one of the most magical, most meticulously restored estates in Los Angeles, a house that was already over a century old when it made its one and only move, and hasn't needed to move since. House number 3. 320 Wellington Street West, Chatham-Kent, Ontario, 5 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, over 3,500 square feet, built in 1896, listed at $568,000, Canada's first appearance on this list. Right off the top, this house has credentials most of these listings can't touch. It's received actual Preservation Awards, one from the Mayor of Chatham-Kent, and another from the Imperial Order Daughters of the Empire, a Canadian heritage organization dating back to the turn of the last century, dedicated to protecting exactly this kind of historic property. This house is also formally listed among the sites of significant historic value in the entire municipality of Chatham-Kent. That's not marketing language, that's official municipal recognition that this building matters to the region's history. The listing describes superb craftsmanship throughout intricate millwork, original hardwood flooring still intact after 129 years, and a dedicated music room complete with built-ins. The kind of purpose-built space that tells you exactly what mattered to whoever lived here in the 1890s. Gorgeous stained glass windows are worked into the design as well, catching light through what's described as an epic central staircase, the kind of detail that turns a simple trip up to the second floor into something genuinely striking. Beyond the main house, there's an original carriage house still standing on the property. Separate from the home itself, the listing pitches it as the perfect hobbyist workshop, a 100-plus-year-old structure originally built for horses and carriages, now waiting to become someone's private garage or studio space. 5 bedrooms and 4.5 bathrooms is a genuinely generous layout for a Victorian this size. And the listing specifically notes countless work from home options throughout, meaning this century home has quietly adapted itself to modern professional life without losing its original character. Here's a detail worth pointing out. Zillow doesn't even have pricing or square footage data cleanly attached to this listing. No Zestimate, no rent estimate. Home type, simply unknown. That's common with older, heavily protected heritage properties that don't move through the market the way typical homes do. The county's own historic designation process tends to keep these kinds of sales quieter and slower than average. The neighborhood itself walks well, a walk score of 87, very walkable, situated right along Wellington St West among other historic homes in the same price range and era. 5 bedrooms, a preserved carriage house, official heritage status from both the mayor's office and a National Women's Historical Order, and a stained glass staircase that's clearly the centerpiece of the whole home. $568,000 for a genuine piece of protected Canadian Victorian history, proof that the creepiest, most character-filled old houses on Zillow aren't just an American phenomenon. House number 4. The O'Leary Mansion, 726 West Garfield Boulevard, Chicago, Illinois, 12 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 6,270 square feet, built around 1880 to 1890. Listed at $473,000, roughly $45 a square foot for one of the most notorious names in Chicago history. Here's the origin story. Straight from the listing, this mansion was commissioned by James O'Leary in honor of his mother, Catherine O'Leary, the woman whose cow allegedly started the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Whether the cow story is fully true or partly legend, the O'Leary name has been tied to that fire for over 150 years, and this house was built specifically to honor the woman at the center of it. But James O'Leary himself is a story on his own. He was known as Big Jim O'Leary, one of Chicago's most infamous gambling kingpins in the early 20th century. And that history is physically embedded in this house. The listing specifically calls out 2 of Big Jim's walk-in vaults, still standing inside the mansion today. Actual bank-style vaults, built into a private residence by a man running underground gambling operations across Chicago. That's not decorative. That's functional infrastructure from an era when a man like O'Leary needed somewhere secure to keep large amounts of cash off the books inside his own home. This house has real documented recognition too. It's been featured by Crane's Chicago Business and covered multiple times on Channel 11 and PBS. This isn't an obscure local rumor. It's a nationally recognized piece of Chicago crime and fire history, sitting quietly on Garfield Boulevard. All 4 levels of the house, including the basement, have high ceilings and oversized rooms, genuinely rare for a basement level in a house this old, and worth noting given what those basement spaces may have once been used for under Big Jim's ownership. Original woodwork and moldings remain throughout. And behind the main house sits a full 2-story coach house, matching the mansion's scale. Here's a detail that separates this from most historic properties. Both the main mansion and the coach house have flat roofs, and both offer genuine downtown Chicago skyline views. That's not a common feature for a Victorian-era home flat roof access with a skyline view, was clearly an intentional design choice, giving Big Jim a private vantage point over the city he operated in. The listing is upfront that this needs serious work selling as is, with the honest acknowledgement that it needs real TLC before reaching its potential. But it also states plainly what the finished product could become: a multi-million-dollar mansion once restored, given its scale, its history, and its location minutes from downtown, fine dining, the University of Illinois at Chicago, and the Obama Presidential Center now rising nearby. 12 bedrooms. 2 walk-in vaults, built for a gambling kingpin, a name directly tied to the fire that reshaped an entire city. Flat roofs with skyline views on both the mansion and the coach house. $473,000 for a piece of Chicago's criminal and civic history rolled into one property, a house built to honor the woman blamed for burning down the city by the son who went on to build an empire of his own inside its walls. House number 5, 250 Douglas Street, Eureka Valley, San Francisco. Built in 1885. 13 bedrooms across the building, 0 individually listed bathrooms, 7,980 square feet. Listed at $7.35 million, and this one isn't really a single-family home at all. It's a designated San Francisco landmark hiding in plain sight. Start with the legal status, because it's the most important fact here. This building was officially designated San Francisco Landmark number 80 back on December 7th, 1975. That's not a marketing claim, that's a formal historic designation from the city itself, meaning this building's exterior and character are permanently protected under municipal law. Look at what that landmark status is protecting. Baroque Queen Anne architecture, a commanding facade, a full shingled roof, and multiple distinctive towers rising above the block. It was originally built in 1885 as a grand single-family private residence, a genuine Gilded Age mansion, before the city around it grew up and changed shape entirely. And here's the wild part. Sometime in the early 20th century, this single grand residence was carved up into 14 individually designed apartment units. Each one has its own unique layout and its own architectural character, meaning nobody stamped out identical units when they subdivided this house. They preserved individuality room by room, floor by floor, even while turning one family's mansion into a 14-unit building. Every single unit is currently tenant-occupied, each separately metered for its own electricity. There are 2 sets of coin-operated washers and dryers in the building, plus a single car garage that's leased out separately from any of the apartments. There's also a 2-room, non-residential office space with its own bathroom, 1 room currently leased to an outside business, the other used as the building's own management office. The listing even notes that these 2 rooms could potentially be converted into an additional residential unit, subject to city approval, meaning there's still untapped potential inside a building already operating at 14 units. Beyond the historic main structure, the sale includes an adjacent RH2 zoned buildable lot, which currently holds a small rentable studio cottage that's the extra parcel, separate from the main mansion, offering real future development or expansion potential on top of everything already generating income. Inside the main building, the grand entry hall still has its original stained glass windows, detailed period woodwork, and a genuinely beautiful central staircase, the architectural heart of the original 1885 residence, still intact after being divided into 14 separate homes for over a century. The location does a lot of the selling on its own. This sits in the heart of Eureka Valley, walking distance to the Castro District, Dolores Park, and Kite Hill, surrounded by restaurants, cafes, bars, and neighborhood shops, with public transit close by. 13 plus bedrooms spread across 14 individually designed apartments, a formally landmarked 1885 Baroque Queen Anne mansion, stained glass, original woodwork, and a central staircase that survived over 100 years of subdivision. $7.35 million for one of San Francisco's most legally protected pieces of Victorian history, a genuine mansion that quietly became an entire apartment building and never lost its landmark status along the way. House number 6. The J. Donald Cameron Mansion. 407 North Front Street, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. 10 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 11,800 square feet, built in 1870. Listed at $1.395 million, sitting on the corner of State and North Front, literally steps from the Pennsylvania state capitol. Start with the number that stands out immediately. 11 fireplaces. 11. Spread across this housewood, burning fireplaces in 6 of the bedrooms alone, plus more in the dining room, sitting room, breakfast room, and a main level room with a mix of gas, electric, and true wood-burning types throughout. That's not a house that occasionally used a fire for atmosphere. That's a house engineered, room by room, around the fireplace as the primary source of heat and light, back when this was standard for a home of this scale in 1870. Look at the ceiling heights, 13 feet throughout. That's not typical even for Grand Victorian homes. Most run 9 or 10 feet on main floors. 13-foot ceilings on a house this size create a scale that feels less like a residence and more like a public institution, an effect reinforced by the solid stone construction and masonry that make up the entire exterior. The listing details a sweeping grand staircase, stained glass windows, and huge windows offering direct views of the Susquehanna River. The property actually has documented waterfront features, meaning some rooms look straight out over the water that runs along downtown Harrisburg. Intricate millwork runs throughout, and the plaster walls and hardwood, tile, and brick flooring are all still original to a 155-year-old structure. Here's what makes this listing genuinely unusual. It's dual purpose, offered simultaneously for both residential and commercial sale. The property is currently operating as office space, and the listing states outright that it's zoned for both commercial and residential use. That means whoever buys this isn't necessarily buying a home. They might be buying a functioning office building with the legal flexibility to convert it back into the 10-bedroom Victorian mansion it originally was. The room list itself reflects that split identity. Alongside the bedrooms, there's a sitting room, a breakfast room, a sun and Florida room, a conservatory room, and multiple separate offices spread across both the main and upper levels, a layout that's clearly been adapted over the decades to function as a working commercial space while never fully losing its original residential bones. Outside, there's a dedicated parking lot accommodating up to 19 vehicles, an enormous amount of parking for a single property in downtown Harrisburg, explicitly marketed toward gatherings or events, reinforcing just how flexible this building's second life could be. Here's the number that tells you how long this house has been waiting for the right buyer: 553 days on Zillow. Over a year and a half on the market, with just over 2,000 views and 109 saves genuine interest. But nobody's pulled the trigger on a project this large and this architecturally ambiguous. And the tax bill reflects the property's institutional scale, $19,581 a year, on a tax-assessed value of $500,000, a significant gap between what the county has it valued at and what it's actually listed for. 10 bedrooms, 11 fireplaces, 13-foot ceilings. A grand staircase and river views a few blocks from the state capitol building itself. $1.395 million for a 155-year-old stone mansion that spent its recent history as office space, zoned to become either a boardroom or a bedroom, whichever future its next owner decides to build. House number 7. The Gingerbread Mansion, 400 Birding Street, Ferndale, California, 9,000 square feet, built in 1882. Listed at $1.95 million, 0 bedrooms, 0 bathrooms officially recorded, because this isn't really a house anymore. It's a fully operating bed and breakfast. Ferndale itself is known as one of Northern California's best preserved Victorian villages, and this building is considered its crown jewel. The listing calls it, without hesitation, the one and only gingerbread mansion, and Humboldt County agrees. This isn't a house that merely survived 143 years. It's a landmark that the entire town is built around. Here's the key detail. This property has already been through a complete years-long restoration. The listing is upfront that after years of restoration and TLC, the current owners are finally ready to hand off the finished product. That means whoever buys this isn't taking on a project, they're stepping directly into a fully functioning business, ready to generate income the day escrow closes. And it's flexible by design. The zoning covers multifamily, commercial, neighborhood commercial, and single-family use, all at once, meaning a buyer could keep running it exactly as a bed and breakfast, convert it into a private residence, or realistically do both simultaneously, exactly as the listing suggests. Look at the price history and you can see how much this property's value has moved over the years. It first hit the market in 2010 at $999,000. By 2012, it dropped to $924,900. Then in 2018, it reappeared completely repriced at $2.2 million, later adjusted down to $1.95 million, essentially doubling in value over that 6-year gap, reflecting both the completed restoration and Ferndale's growing reputation as a preserved Victorian destination. The description leans hard into the property's presentation. Full banquet hall for hosting events, elaborate landscaped gardens surrounding the building, and multiple ornate clawfoot bathtubs positioned as showpiece features throughout the guest rooms, the kind of detail that turns a bathroom into a destination in its own right for paying guests. Because this operates as a business rather than a private residence, Zillow doesn't track it the way it does a typical single-family home, no Zestimate, no bedroom or bathroom count in the standard fields, because the internal layout is built around guest suites and shared hospitality spaces rather than a conventional family floor plan. 9,000 square feet, a fully restored, income-ready bed and breakfast wearing the most elaborate gingerbread trim in one of California's best-preserved Victorian towns. $1.95 million for what the listing itself calls the marquee property of Humboldt County, a house so ornate, so historically significant, that it stopped being just a private home decades ago and became the entire town's signature landmark instead. House number 8, the Anthony House. 1630 Central Avenue, Alameda, California, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 2,426 square feet, built around 1880 to 1882. Originally listed as high as $3 million, now valued closer to $1.7 million. Here's the detail that makes this house completely unlike anything else on this list. It has changed hands only once in its entire history. From the original Anthony family straight to the current owners, no flips, no chain of estate sales, no decades of neglect and rediscovery. 140 plus years, and this house has only ever belonged to 2 families total. Look at what that kind of ownership stability actually preserved. The listing calls the exterior gilded Corinthian columns framing the entrance, double-tiered bay windows stacked one above the other, pulling extra light into the rooms behind them. This is genuine period Italianate architecture, considered one of Alameda's flagship Victorians, revered specifically by artists and architects for how completely intact its original details remain. The property sits on over 1/3 of an acre in Alameda's Gold Coast neighborhood, including whimsical English natural gardens surrounding the house not manicured, formal landscaping, but a deliberately looser romantic garden style that fits the house's era. There's also a 2-story carriage house on the property, though this one was actually built in 1976 as a later addition, flexible enough to serve as a studio, a gym, a car barn, or a full accessory dwelling unit. Inside, the ceilings soar, and the listing is specific that the architectural details throughout have been zealously preserved, not restored to look old, but genuinely maintained across a century and a half without ever being stripped out or modernized away. That's the rarest kind of Victorian survival story. Continuity instead of rescue. Practically, the house isn't frozen in time. There's a full basement with real room for expansion or storage, a completely new foundation underneath the original structure, and a modernized kitchen fitted with a Viking range, meaning the essential systems have been brought forward, while the historic shell and details above them were left completely alone. The price history tells its own story about how the market has valued this house. It first hit the market in October 2022 at $3 million, came back in June 2023 slightly lower, dropped twice more over the following 2 months, and was ultimately pulled from the market in August 2023 without selling at any of those price points. Zillow's current Zestimate sits at $1.71 million, roughly 40% below that original $3 million, ask a significant gap between what the sellers believed this singular piece of history was worth and what the market was actually willing to pay. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. 140 years of history with only one prior ownership change in the entire lifetime of the house. Corinthian columns, tiered bay windows, and an English garden wrapped around an 1880s Italianate that's never really left its own family not a rescue project, not a fixer-upper, just an extraordinarily rare case of a Gilded Age house that was simply, quietly taken care of the entire time.